Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Windsor, your decluttering and organising coach. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the beautiful Serina Bird for also joining me. Serina is our guest on this episode of the January 2021 series that I am calling I Know Just the Girl. So if you came to me and asked me about anything to do with money or budgets, I can help you with the organising structure of that sort of thing, but really, I know just the girl for you, and that is Serina. Serina is the author of The Joyful Frugalista and also the host of the podcast of the same name, The Joyful Frugalista. Her mission is to help people save money and empower them to live an abundant and joyful life. So thank you so much for joining me, Serina. How are you?
Thank you. And let me just say too, it was such an honor to have you as one of my early podcast guests too. So thank you.
You were
for being my
the
guest.
very first podcast I was ever a guest on. It was so much fun. It is still one of my favorites. So thank you again for that. But we'll get on to you. I'd love you to share with us a bit about yourself. And for those who don't know you at all, what you do and why.
Oh, just some, small questions to start. No, it's great. So
tell me your whole life story.
So as you mentioned, I'm author of The Joyful Frugalista. So I had been sort of like this frugalista in a closet for many years. So I was working in the public service for nearly 20 years. For much of that, I was working with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So I was a diplomat, basically working in foreign affairs. But I was frugal. So even when I was on posting, I'd go to gala balls and, country National Day events wearing op-shop clothes, and I would do all of those sorts of things. And it was sort of one of those things that you didn't talk about. You didn't talk about money in those sorts of contexts. And, we were very aggressive in those days in terms of saving and investing to get ahead. And, I'd see my colleagues, some of them were really good with money and some of them weren't so good at money. And particularly too, sometimes when you are mixing with a lot of people who are very wealthy, like you'd think, you're a diplomat, you've got lots of money, right? But you're still a public servant on a public service salary, going overseas on posting, meeting with a lot of really wealthy people. And some people would actually almost get themselves in debt, come back from posting with nothing. I know it sounds crazy, right? So I guess I sort of had this secret frugal lifestyle, and it was really nice to actually come out and proud about that. And the impetus was over 6 years ago. Sadly, my first marriage became violent, and I eventually took out a domestic violence order. But then, of course, my whole financial circumstance changed overnight. We had a lot of investment properties, which were quite highly geared at that time. But suddenly although I had a fantastic career, I had childcare fees, which, as you probably know, in Canberra are the highest in Australia. I had legal fees, I had mortgages, 10 mortgages to be responsible for. And now I knew that I had always been good with money and I'd always been frugal. But this was like a new layer. This wasn't just like, fun, choosing to be frugal. This was having to be frugal. But it sort of occurred to me that when you know that you're good with money, that you have that confidence that you can make your money stretch, that it is very empowering, because I thought to myself, there's probably a lot of people, particularly women, who stay in these kind of relationships because they're so scared about how on earth am I going to manage with the money. But I knew I'd find a way through, which I did. I mean, it wasn't easy, but I did. And so that was really the genesis for starting to write about saving money. And initially it was mainly actually low cost meals, which is still something that I'm really passionate about too, about blogging about food, because from a point of resilience, I think when you can put a meal on the table for your family, you sort of feel that that's like a really significant accomplishment. And once you can do that, you can do other things, if that makes sense.
It does.
And a year and a bit or so ago, I actually left my full-time work. It had actually become toxic, which, it happens. So there's no blame on anyone in particular. But, those personalities are still there. And I caught up with a former colleague, and yes, there are still problems. So I'm very glad that I'm out of that situation.
You got out when you did. Yeah.
I got out when I did. But because I was in a stable financial position, I could. So I've remarried now. We've been working together jointly over the last 3 years together in our financial situation. We just paid off our mortgage on my unit, which is where I'm recording for. We have investment properties. We have good super. And so that's then enabled me now to flip to do other things that I'm really passionate about in the startup world. And so I'm now have founded the Joyful Business Club, which is about supporting women to shine in their business and startup, as you know, and I'll be offering a mastermind offering soon with that to help better support women to make their dreams a reality. So I think it's really important to save and invest money, but it's also really important to have your money work for you. So you're aligned with your passion and your purpose. And my dream is to make that into a microloan funding mechanism to really help women get the money they need to take their businesses forward. And then more recently, I've started the Joyful Fashionista, which is about secondhand clothing. So all those fabulous clothing that, you might have had pre-baby, particularly corporate wear, to have a mechanism so that you can sell that and pass that on. So that's a long introduction from me.
So much. Well, we were just talking before we started recording, like the Joyful brand now has just like boomed this year. It's huge. Like you've got your book and your podcast and then the business club and now the Fashionista as well. And they all flow so nicely together because there's so much around money, especially for women, of course, as we know. And you have all of these little avenues now where you can help women at different levels of their abundance journey, I suppose, like whether they're coming in with negative stories or if they're doing well, but they're ready to like do the next step of like investing or whatever it might be for them. You've got something for everyone, which is really, really cool. And the fashionista stuff, obviously, I think personally that that will hit home across the board to the audience watching here, watching this episode, because we often get to a point that our bodies have changed, whether that is from children or aging or just a career change, whatever it might be, and you have these gorgeous clothes that just aren't working for you anymore. And I know personally with my clients, the hurdle of but it's still good, or but it might fit again, or but
aspirational clothes, I call them.
yeah,
I'll buy it from an off shop. I aspire to fit into that, and of course it sits there. It doesn't. It never happens.
And I mean, sometimes it's nice to have something that's like driving you towards a goal or something like that. But at the same time, the clothes that fit you 15 years ago or even 5 years ago, if that many things in your life has changed, well, just lose the weight if you want to, or do the exercise and gain the muscle, whatever it is you need to do to make yourself feel happy. Hopefully you feel happy first. That's a whole nother story. But if your body changes enough that you would fit those clothes again, are they the clothes you want? Or do you want to be a completely new wardrobe? Anyway, that's a huge thing. And I love that you've set up this avenue so women can declutter their wardrobes and know that they're going to people who are going to appreciate them and love them. They might get a bit of cash as well. That's a nice way to earn some money that you can then spend on, new clothes if you want, or more of the, cycle through the system, Anyway, I'm not,
exactly.
my words aren't flowing for me today.
No, they are. They're flowing for you incredibly well. But, something that I'm really big on is this inclusivity, from a body image point of view. Like everyone is beautiful, no matter what their size, whether they're tall, short. I mean, I'm less than 5 foot and I'm probably a size 16 at the moment. And I still love fashion. And, sometimes people think that you're not allowed to love fashion unless you're a size 8 and you're 20. When you find an outfit that you just put on and you just feel beautiful in it, I mean, that's just magic.
Yeah.
And that can happen no matter what shape you have. Everyone is beautiful.
Absolutely. And yes, I mean, we could talk about that for forever because I've been so many different sizes and I'm definitely not the smallest I have ever been right now. In fact, I'm probably near the top, but I love my wardrobe. I'm looking at it right now. I love my wardrobe because I know that I can put on anything and I know that it fits and it's comfortable and I like the colors. And that's what I want for all women. I want you to just love what you're wearing, but it takes time and it takes so much work to get there. And you've given us another avenue to support that. So thank you for that.
Well,
and that is a nice little way to get into, you get you can declutter and clear space and then bring new stuff in that's not going to cost the earth. You can make a little bit of money that way too. And that's a nice way to sort of start to learn about this, the Frugalista ways as well, because it's something that a lot of us can do quite easily and quickly, is change the stuff in our wardrobe realistically. So I'm just moving on from that. What would you say is the biggest misconception in your work? I imagine that there's a lot, because money is just such a huge...
Oh yeah, there's so many people have different money blocks, but the key thing is that, and I really wanted to try and redress this, is when we talk about saving money or frugality, we tend to think about it being miserly.
Yeah,
so
like,
people say, oh, I know someone who's frugal, and they'll talk about someone who's like, doing things like stealing, like theft, as in, someone who goes to motels or hotels and steals bath towels. That was so frugal. I was like, no, that's theft. That's not frugal. That's not saving money. Or, when they go out to dinner and there's that one person in the group who's got the calculator out and is trying to find a way that they don't have to pay. Or I've been told this is a big thing, that the person who offers, I'll just collect the money for everyone because I've got the card, because they know that everyone's going to put in a little bit extra, so that then they get to pocket that $10, $20, $30 or whatever that's left over, rather than giving a tip. And they're doing this. And so that's like, oh, they're really frugal. No, they're a cheapskate. They're not actually frugal.
Yeah.
So frugality to me is actually about good stewardship of money, and it's about having real respect for our money, for our possessions, for our relationships, and also to sustainability, so for the planet. So it's really about valuing and appreciating what we have. It's not about self-deprivation necessarily. Like, if you want something, you buy it. Like this year we've bought quite a few things with IT equipment, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. I had a ski trip, I have no problem with that as well, either. So there's been quite a lot of things that where it's a priority, we will buy it. And I have certain people who'll say, oh, you're frugalista, you're not supposed to go skiing. And I'm like, well, I know skiing's not a cheap thing, but we actually really, really enjoy it as a family. It brings us a lot of joy. I first sort of really started falling for my husband when we went skiing together. I used to go skiing with my dad growing up. I just love it. I love being up in that clean mountain air. Love tearing down the slopes. So we do it.
Yeah, and it's often seen as a luxury. And I mean, it is. It's a luxury. It's something that's out of reach of a lot of people. But your frugal ways have given you the capacity to lead towards those things. And I know that, you're passionate about good food and good quality and that sort of thing. So you're not stingy. Frugality to you and what you teach is not, hold on to that t-shirt that cost you $5 and, it doesn't matter if it's stained and has holes in it and all that kind of stuff because it's still a t-shirt. Like you don't, your kids don't run around in rags. You always look fantastic. You eat great food. And I think that's probably why you were able to be that closet frugalista for so long, was that nobody could tell. You didn't come across as stingy. So
yeah, well, I mean, this was given to me on a clothes swap. This was given to me on a clothes swap. So what am I wearing? This was a gift. So yeah, like you see what I mean? Like it's so many things that, I get through my community now that, don't cost me much or don't cost me anything at all. But, when they're things that you really like, and, it's quite a different thing. So generosity is so much more than money. And I think there are a lot more groups these days that are recognizing that. You are so much more than just a dollar sign or a dollar tag.
Yeah. Awesome. So, okay, what would you tell a woman who wanted to improve her relationship with money in 2021?
This is a big one. So I do run courses. So I run my next course, 6 weeks to abundance, is on the 13th of January, and I've got another one starting in March. And I know you have done this course as well.
I did the first round of that course, and it's just, a small plug for Serina's intro abundance course here. It's really lovely to be around other women and share those stories, and see where your money stories are, and how they're reflecting on your everyday life. It's really, really interesting. And if you haven't talked about money, if you're not someone who talks about money or is scared of money in any way, it is a wonderful place to start. It's like a nice 6-week sort of intensive, almost just throwing yourself in there and understanding your back pocket, I suppose.
Well, yeah, so I cover everything from, fixing those money leaks. So some Frugalista tips to start with, right through to abundance mindset, relationships and money, career, side hustle, finding your dream and investing. And I even cover debt as well. So you cover all of those things. But back to that kind of concept of, you've got a woman who's like, I've got some blockages with money, what do you do about it? And it is individual with every different person. So it's a mix of needing those practical skills about how to negotiate, save money, find bargains, look at where your expenses are going, track things, and having the courage to invest. And so it's a mixture between that and the mindset. But I always start off by asking my clients who I coach or in my course, when you hear the word money, what is your first reaction? Because that will tell you straight away. If people say, when I think of money, I think of abundance. If I think of security, usually it's like I think of conflict, I think of arguments, I think of not enough. And that usually reflects what was happening in their childhood, where there probably wasn't enough money and they saw their parents arguing over money. So, of course, when they become adults, do they want to talk about money? Hell no. And as women, we usually don't have conversations about money too. And it's really important to have that safe space where we can start to have those conversations about money, because it's not bad to have money. It's not evil to be wealthy. The love of money, the attachment to money, that's the problem. Like when like people who throw themselves off buildings because, the price of gold's gone down. That is the problem, where that pursuit of that wealth is more important than your relationships and other things. But we know that so many of our relationships, I think between 70 to 80%, in Australia, fail because of money differences. Now, this is in a country where we're one of the most affluent countries in the world. We really are in a lot of different indexes, yet we also have the highest levels of personal debt. Now, why is that happening? Well, there's a number of reasons. And that is, I think, because we're being sold a dream that money equals happiness. And it doesn't. Stuff doesn't equal happiness. However, when you don't have financial security, you don't sleep well at night, you tend to argue with your spouse, you tend to, it just has that ripple effect. So it's really important when you are in a good financial position, it gives you power and it gives you choices. So for instance, in my previous job, when it turned toxic, I could just walk.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not stuck there, having a mental breakdown. And I shouldn't even say these kind of things in a throwaway line, because, mental health is so important. But, that's really where I would have been.
Gotten there. Like that sort of stress can do that to you. Being in the wrong environment can really seriously affect your mental health.
Exactly. And when you are stuck in that environment, and, I think it's becoming even more pronounced during COVID, because this sort of rhetoric is now like, you should be so lucky you've got this job, rather than, how do we make sure everyone is well? How do we ensure people's well-being? I'm seeing that across the board. It's sort of an excuse in some industries for people to work longer hours. So when you get your money right, so when you know that you have, emergency funds there, when you know that your net worth is growing, when you are able to have these discussions about money, it builds this financial security around you that makes it easier to deal with the resilience and the shocks. Now, I'm now in a very fortunate position where we have very, very little debt, and we now have investment properties that are positively geared. We have superannuation that's very good, that's going to come into place soonish for my husband. But that's not to say we're totally immune. I mean, I don't know what the future happens. I mean, we could have, I don't know, something like, touch wood.
Finished yet? Well, by the time we're recording this, we're only halfway through December. It's still time.
I don't know, we could have mass floods in Canberra and my properties might not be insured. Touch wood. I'm pretty sure they're none of them are ground floor, but you don't know what is going to happen. But when you know how money works, you have that kind of confidence that you can withstand those shocks. You don't see it as, so you've disassociated it from your self-worth. It's just something that you know how to manage a bit better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I mean, that old adage, money doesn't buy happiness. Well, okay, we know that you can't buy stuff to make you happy with the money you've earned, but if you're happy,
marketers are trying to convince us though.
But if you're happy with your money, that's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah.
If you're happy with your money, then everything else just is easier.
Yeah, if you're able to look at a bank statement and really look at it without flipping out and having a heart attack.
Yeah, if you can open your bank statement without,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had a bigger credit card bill last month, which I've just paid last week, and it was a little bit more than I expected. There were some fairly big bills, and there's always big bills for us in December because we're recording in December with our annual insurances. But they're all forecast; they're all in my budget. I know they're going to happen. There's money there. Like I don't freak out about it. I mean, from time to time, you do get unexpected bills. From time to time, there's this trend now where they used to post things and then they send them in emails and they get lost in emails, and the next thing you get this urgent reminder it's overdue straight away. Like I'm now, I've had a couple of those over this last year, and I'm now in the place where I can go, with love. I always pay my bills on time. This is one I missed. I just ring them up and say, look, I'm really sorry. I missed this for some reason. It's coming through in the next few days. Any problems, contact me. Like it's not a big deal. It doesn't throw me into panic.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's all about. If we can feel calmer around it, if we can feel calmer in any situation, but specifically in money, if you're happy with your money and that it will, like, that you've got it under control.
Yeah.
That's that security that I think we're all looking for, and it's especially big for women.
Yeah. And it gives you courage too. Like, I'm in this current startup, land, and I wouldn't have been able to have the courage to develop some of the things that I am doing at the moment. I mean, I don't know if they're going to work or not. I hope they're going to work. I'm certainly putting a lot of effort into it.
Very
But if
exciting.
I was worried about money, sorry.
I said they're very exciting. I'm looking forward to those launching. I can't wait to see where you're growing with this.
Well, I'm excited too. But if you're in that situation where I've got my bank statement and I'm really worried and I can't deal with this, do you think you're going to have the next multi-million-dollar idea and have the courage to show it through? So our mindset when we're thinking about money is just as important, if not more so, than our actual skills. And even the way I track my money, like at the end of every month, and sometimes I'm a bit lazy and I'll store up a few months, but I'll go through and I'll look at all our expenses, and it's not like, oh my God, this is terrible, we spent too much going out. But I'll just look, okay, so this month, this year we haven't spent so much going out, obviously. I think that's been the case with a lot of people. But sometimes I'll note and go, oh, well, that's okay, because there was a birthday that month and there's a few things. So the next month we'll just spend less on that. Or just because I'm looking at it dispassionately, I will see things where I'm like, really, are we using that online subscription? Like, for a while during COVID, we had Stan because we were watching a few Aussie dramas and we really liked it. And so we kept it on for a while, but I was like, saying to hubby, have we used it? He's like, no, we haven't really used it in the last few months. I was like, okay, we'll just cancel it then. So, that's $10 a month, which, is $120 a year. But for a period of time, we were using it, and there's no guilt or there's no issue with that. But it's just when you're able to have that relationship where you're not so triggered, where you feel comfortable, you notice things like that. You notice areas naturally where you can save money, and you start to have these ideas about how you can generate even more money because you're at peace with it.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, okay. Would you I think I know the answer to this one, but would you consider yourself naturally organised?
Well, a bit of both. And so you've seen my house. I think some people will know this story. Not everyone will, but several months ago, it was sort of towards the end of COVID, I think. Oh, no, pre-COVID.
Yes.
Lauren messaged me and said, oh, I'm in the neighborhood. I'll be there in 5 minutes. And I had this, oh my goodness, I've got a decluttering and organizational coach who's coming to my house in 5 minutes, and there's crap everywhere and whatever. And I had a sick kid at home and we had all sorts of stuff happening. But, I didn't feel that my home was so disorganized to the point that I couldn't receive guests.
Mm-hmm.
And, you had, soup and I think toast on the table, and we had a few things and, had clean cutlery. My kids have clean clothes, we're mostly there, but it's a bit of a mix for me. And so I love systems. So I get quite excited. It's, I guess, the entrepreneurial side of me likes systems. So, I've got a folder with all my, finances in.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a bill paying system where I write things down. I've got, for my business, I've got an online bookkeeping system. I've got systems in place for things, and I like working out how I can use those systems more efficiently and effectively for the outcomes that I want. And like, for instance, in terms of organising our home, I've got a whiteboard where we talk about, the evening events, so we can see between my husband and I whether we've got clashes, where we've got birthdays, where we've got things. So I've got those sorts of systems in place. I've got an online, the Google Calendar system, which I use for my appointments so that I make sure I don't miss those. So I like the systems. However, in terms of how we run our family, I'm really big on it not being too neat. Like I've had a bit of a flirt with the minimalist concept this year, mainly because of my Joyful Giving campaign, which was originally going to be to give away 366 items. So I reached that mid-year, and then I sort of sat on it for a while, and now I'm aiming for 1,000. So I've
Really
blogged
close.
about 812, but I've given away over 900. So I'm on track to reach 1,000 this year, hopefully. So, I've been giving away a lot of stuff, and I thought initially I was doing this to become minimalist, but the weird thing is the more I give away, the more people give me. So I've sort of actually been attracting more, even more than I've been giving away, which has been fascinating. But because my children grew up in an environment where their father has OCD, he's been diagnosed with OCD, and there's a lot of pressure on them to do things perfectly, fold things perfectly, not have mess. When they're with me, I'm a little bit more relaxed, particularly with children, because, it's part of their creativity is to have mess. Mind you, the 8-year-old is really, really, really messy. And he said to me the other day when I said, you've got to clean up your room, he sort of had a bit of a huff and he said, why does everything have to be perfect, Mum? I don't know if your kids ever say that to you. And I was like, you are a long way off being perfect, honey. I said, like, out of a 1 to 10, you're currently at about a 3. So we've got a lot of room to work on there.
Yeah, I think we've discussed before that our one of your sons and my son have a similar issue with their bed and the amount of books that live in their bed. But that is a completely separate story. But just looking at your joyful giving, I know a lot of my audience, and more specifically my clients, one of the biggest hurdles for them is getting the stuff out of the house. Like they can make a decision that they don't want it. That's half the battle. And that is a big battle sometimes. But the other whole half of the battle is to actually get it to leave the house.
Yeah.
And as we all know, this year has been, I say this year, we're recording in 2020. It's been even more difficult because you can't just go and donate stuff at the local charity shop. For a long time, they couldn't take things. When they could take things, they had an over supply of donations and they couldn't process them right away because they needed to quarantine things. And then they didn't have the volunteer. Like there was just this ongoing.
I know a lot of the volunteers were elderly.
They just couldn't handle it all. And for you, like you started your 365 gifts, the joyful giving items at the beginning of the year before, the world came to an end.
Leap year. I started with 365 and then my younger son pointed out we actually did have a 29th of February. So 366.
366 you were going to do. And then, everything happened and you were like, how am I going to, you can't give people things when you can't see them, but you found that you hit your target long before, like you were mid-year when you hit your target, and then you went, well, let's see how much more I can do. And you found some beautiful ways. I know that meeting that, I showed up virtually unannounced. I insisted that you count the lunch that you gifted me as one of your joyful giving. That wasn't originally how you planned to do it because it was more of a minimalist challenge. But for me, and anyone who has seen anything about me, I don't like stuff. I don't want more stuff. But, you saved me from going and getting some sort of garbage on the way home because I was really hungry. We got to share that time together, and it was a beautiful soup and bread that you had made from scratch. And, it was a lovely, moment. It was a nice time. It was so much better than me like eating a muesli bar or away. To me, that was a gift. So I love that you did count that because I really wanted that to be like, that's a gift to me, that should count. And yeah, the fact that you've been able to gift so much in a year like this, and it wasn't like you went out looking for, you weren't donating money, you weren't, I'm sure you did your other.
I didn't count financial donations.
Yeah. While a lot of people were able to give different things this year, you were specifically looking for things within your own home or that had been given to you to share with somebody who actually wants them. It's that intentionality that makes a big difference from just decluttering to that.
Yeah, it's actually harder than you might think because coincidentally, several of my friends inspired by me and maybe by you as well had also become minimalists. So some of my usual targets for people that I would give things away to had decided that they didn't want stuff. Like my good friend Trish Smith, who was, I used to give a lot of clothes to. She said, I've made a decision this year that no new item of clothing, any item of clothing, whether op shop or gifted, is not going to pass my threshold this year because I've got too much. And I was like,
Kudos to
oh,
her. That's an awesome rule. I love it.
and I respect that. I really do respect that so much because I understand why she's doing that. But I was a bit like, oh, damn. But I still, she was over here actually a couple of days ago, and I was still able to give her things like books for her grandkids, and she's an avid sewer, so I gave her some material. And it's really important in this giving too, to do it in an intentional way, to really respect the right of the other person to refuse.
Mm,
Like, I could be trying to get her to take my clothes I don't want because it's convenient for me to get the tally up, but that doesn't really quite work, does it?
yeah,
Sometimes people
because
just don't
adding to somebody else's
want
clutter
that
is not,
stuff.
yeah, it's not okay to add to someone else's clutter.
Yeah, so sometimes I have to respect that right, that if they don't want things,
Mm,
that's okay too. It's not a reflection on me. And so I've had some huge wins with it this year. But when I've been looking back at the post, what strikes me the most is the connectedness.
mm,
So I thought what was going to happen, and I haven't quite finished the challenge yet, but what I thought was going to happen was that I was going to be able to write about me being a Ms. Goody Two Shoes. Look at how fabulous I am. I'm saving the world. I'm helping the poor and the needy. And, single-handedly, I'm giving my crap to people who are just so grateful to have it. But, quite seriously, that's kind of what I thought was going to be happening. And I launched on 30th of December, and within a day, we had the bushfires down the coast. And it would have been so tempting and so easy for me to go, right, well, I've launched this challenge. Well, now I've got a whole bootload of crap that I'm going to go and give to these people, and they can stuff it in their church halls, and I can take a selfie and look at how wonderful I am, and I can add it to my tally. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious, but as you know, this was a huge problem with so many people from the goodness of their heart were over giving to these affected communities. And when this all happened, I went, well, what should I do? And my lovely husband, Neil, who was away overseas at the time, luckily, during the bushfires, from, a purely selfish point of view of knowing that his health wise wasn't probably at that phase where he probably should have been in the fires, but he's a long-term RFS volunteer. He said, well, to be honest, when people have just lost everything like their house, what they need is empathy. They don't need stuff. They're not in that point, they're not in that frame of mind where they can say, well, here's a whole, garbage bag full of crap. Like they're not in that space. What they need is empathy and understanding
mm.
of what they're going through, someone to listen to them and someone to, see what their needs are. So that was the first takeaway. And then another friend who'd worked in the charity not-for-profit sector for a long time said, well, you don't know also where people are at with their priorities, like particularly rural people. Their priority might be on fencing. And at first I was like, fencing? Like what the? Because, I was thinking, like white picket fence, like who cares? But, like when you've lost, your livestock
Yeah.
and, you are concerned for the safety of your remaining livestock, and it's also your livelihood. Like getting those fences in is much more important than you getting nice, pretty dresses for yourself. You're
Yeah,
not
I don't
concerned
have a
about that.
wardrobe to hang them in yet, so.
Yeah, exactly. And then the third one was the distribution channels. Like, I think people sort of think you'll just drive down to these fire affected areas and sort of, hand out stuff like whatever, it'll be fine. And some people have done that and it's been really well received.
Mm,
But there are established charities and established distribution, networks. And when I asked friends who worked at Vinnie's, they said, well, just donate to our stores, because then someone will come into a store in a fire affected area and say, I've just lost everything, and they'll give them stuff. And then they have also the autonomy that they can choose what they want,
mm-hmm. Exactly.
which is really empowering.
Yeah. And if those things don't go to people who, if it's not gifted onto them because they need it, it gets sold to other people.
Yeah.
And then that money can be used to support. And I actually spoke to somebody just yesterday. A client was, she knows that she's quite well off, and she used to feel guilty shopping at op shops because she thought that, she could afford to buy things elsewhere. So why should she? Because when you buy at an op shop, that money goes to the charity. That's why you do it. Like the fact that you get it for a bargain is great, but you're also stopping the consumerist cycle by having, new things made for you or whatever. But that money still goes to a good place. They're not there and cheap so that poor people can afford them. They're there so that everyone can benefit from this system.
Yeah, it's a bit of both, and this is an interesting question because I've had someone, actually a podcast guest, after we had finished the podcast, she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm an op shop," and I was like, "Oh, I wish we talked about it on the podcast." But one of her family members had actually said to her, "You shouldn't buy from op shops because you're depriving poor people of that opportunity." And this is a very, contested area. And I think it does depend a little bit on where these op shops are and who their market are. But in general, my understanding, I know, you as a decluttering coach, you probably have even better relationships with op shops than I do, is they have so much stuff. They have a lot of stuff. They're not short on stock. What they need is for people to buy it and to move it on. And that money they raise often goes to things like gift cards and other things to help people.
Yeah.
Put food on the table and other things, help pay rent and other costs.
Yeah, there's so many levels that we can support those kind of charities. It's the donations, they still do want those donations, but yes, you're right. It's not the only part. They're not storing them for people until those people need them. So
No.
they need the donations, they need volunteers, and they need the cash. So whatever you go in and buy, you're helping. So yeah, it's a great big circle.
Exactly. And they need good quality donations. So during my Joyful
Yes.
Giving, I did give to op shops as well, but they are usually my last port of call, and only for items which I believe they will be able to resell. So I won't give them things that are of poor quality. Because they've got their businesses, to run, and if I just give them things that are poor quality, like they're just going to have to dispose of them and use up their valuable resources to do that.
Yeah, the amount of money that those charities have to spend on dumping because the things that people have left as donations have been actual garbage. Like sometimes it's not just for some people it might be garbage and for other people it might be a treasure, like the trash and treasure. No, it's actual garbage because, they've missed bin week or because they can't be bothered taking it themselves or whatever. Like soiled clothes, actual nappies, like it's awful. If you talk to people at different charity shops, it's really bad when people will donate. It's not a donation. If it's not something you would give to somebody else, then don't give it to a charity shop. It's just not okay.
Totally agree.
So much to talk about. We always have so much to talk about. I'm going to try and wrap us up because, we might have to do another episode at another time or something. But before we go, I did want to ask, do you have a favorite decluttering tip that you can share either with our audience or with me?
Well, I mean, you've been such a huge inspiration as well. And we now have a dedicated box where we put things in. During COVID, it ended up being more than just one box, but that's okay. Now that I've been able to clear some things, it's a bit different. But I guess the thing is, during my Joyful Giving is just to normalize giving, just to normalize the share economy. So whenever I see something that books in my bookcase, they're lovely. There's nothing wrong with them, but really, am I really going to read them? I've got so many books already, from the library and other things. And I'm a mum with 2 kids and 3 startups. So, I mean, really, do I get a chance to read as much as I'd like anyway? Probably not. So when I see a book that I know someone will like, or an item of clothing or a piece of jewelry or whatever it is, and I know I'm meeting with someone, I just take stuff along. So like, it's a weird thing to get used to at first, but like I'll go and catch up with a girlfriend for coffee or lunch, and I'll just take a bag of stuff and go, would you like this? Would you like this necklace? Would you like this book? Would you like this? And I think too, because I'm a little bit empathetic, have a little bit of that empathy sort of, receptor going on. I don't always get it right. But sometimes I just have a feeling like, I've seen that friend in blue before. I wonder if she'll like this blue dress. And it's been amazing the amount of times things have got quite spectacularly right in a beautiful way. Like even last week, I gave someone a book. I thought they might like some chick flick books. And they're like, oh my God, I've got all the other books in this series. I just didn't have this one. And so really, like, it gets stuff out of my house, like every time. Like, I think it's just a constant process. I don't think you can just declutter and leave it. I think decluttering is just like a constant thing because our lives change. Like, I no longer have little babies in my life. I'm no longer a university student. Like, my life is changing. I'm going into new ways. And so, suddenly one day you look at something and go, look, I don't need that anymore. And so you just get in that habit of just taking it with you when you visit people and say, by the way, I know your kids are a bit younger or whatever, his stuff. When I go to visit my in-laws, I take a box of scraps for their chooks. I know, I rock up with an ice cream
Would you like
container.
some rotting vegetables?
And they give me eggs from their chooks. I mean, they always had anyway, but like it's just and they're pretty good natured. So they want, the scraps for their chooks.
Yeah.
And they look after their great grandkids. So I turn up with clothes for their great grandkids and books. And I just make that part of my normal cycle. When I'm visiting people, I'm thinking, okay, I'm visiting this person. What might they like that I have that I no longer want? And people have sort of got a bit used to it. They think it's a bit weird, but I do think that, this normalizing of the sharing community is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. I remember as a young mum, like when my kids were very, very little, my only out of the house activity was mother's group. And we'd go to a park or a cafe and the kids would, do their thing and I'd get to talk to actual humans, which was always nice. And it was quite normal back then that, if one kid was slightly bigger than another, you would, you'd show up and there'd be a whole bag of barely used baby clothes that will perfectly fit your child. And there was no judgment, there was no weirdness. It was just this sharing. And often when it's for kids, we don't see a problem. Or not as much, maybe, especially with baby clothes, because everybody knows how quickly babies grow.
Yeah.
So sharing baby clothes is such a gift, and everybody is excited to receive new clothes for their kids, to a limit, I think. I've seen some extreme situations, but but I love your idea of it just being like an everyday thing. I would add, and I know that you do this already, but for those watching, if you are gifting to people in the way that we're talking about now, as in, for lack of a better term, hand-me-down type stuff. Firstly, make sure it's in decent condition that you would want to receive it in the first place. But also when you gift it, say, look, if you don't want it, do say so. If you take it home and it doesn't quite work or your kids grow out of it, whatever the situation, feel free to pass it on, or in any way that you want to pass it on is fine. I like to make sure that people who get my stuff, they know that I don't care if I see it on Facebook to be sold. I don't care if you get cash for that. I don't care if you get heaps of cash for that. Good for you. Like, pass it on, donate it, whatever you want to do. When it's left my house, it's yours now. You can do whatever you like with it. And a lot of people, that get to a point where they're struggling with clutter, it's because they've been handed down things and they feel like they have to hold on to it because it was a gift.
Yeah, it was
I can't get
special.
rid of it because it was a gift, and that's a big thing.
Yeah, it is. It is a big thing, and I hear you. And having that is really important. I was gifted some books and some puzzles from a good friend of mine, probably about, I don't know, about 4 years ago now. So it was actually her sister's. So the books belonged to her niece and nephew, and I'm now starting to give those away because my kids are older. And this week I mentioned that I had my lovely friend Trish over, and I gave her some for her grandkids, which is, like what I would normally do anyway. But what was interesting is I had actually forgotten is my friend's niece has the same name as one of my friend's Trish's granddaughters. So she opened up the book and she went, "Have you written my granddaughter's name in this already?" And I went, no, it's just my friend's niece has the same name as your granddaughter. So it's actually really special. And so I've messaged my friend who gave it to me in the first instance and said, please let your sister know that your books have gone to another very good home to someone who has the same name as her daughter.
How beautiful. Oh, okay. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining me, Serina. This is always lovely. Anyone watching that would like to get hold of Serina, you can find, we will drop all the links where you are watching this, but Serina Bird, the Joyful Frugalista, all of her social media is the Joyful Frugalista or expansions of, am I right?
Yes, Joyful Frugalista, the Joyful Business Club, the Joyful Fashionista.
Fashionista, that's the one. And also check out her podcast, which you can find anywhere you can find podcasts. And they're all wonderful, great interviews with people about different views on frugalism, I suppose. And I'm episode number 10, if anyone wants to check out that episode too.
It's a very good one. I get a lot of positive comments about it.
Thank you. All right, we will leave it there. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you for the next episode. Thank you, Serina.